Morning, church. How are you? Good. I'm glad you're here with us. I missed you all last week. I want to say thank you to you guys and the leadership for giving me the opportunity to go back. I got to go back home and preach at the church that I grew up at. And then for those of you who remember from Saturated, Dennis McGinley that came and preached at Saturated, his wife passed away this week. So other than my wife and my mom, there's probably not a more impactful woman in my life. She saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of what teenage Matthew was. So she's in real sainthood. So I got a chance to spend some time with them, and it was sweet to be with them. And they just said they wanted to send their thank you to you guys for letting me be down there and kind of spend a little time with them. So last time I got to preach with you all, it seems like it's been a while, so I had several Red Bulls this morning. So last time we talked about courage. Remember we talked about Shadrach, and Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and how they had a chance. They could either bow like everyone else did, or they could take a stand and be thrown in the fiery furnace. And I want us to kind of pick back up on that particular theme. We talked about Christian courage, and it wasn't like the absence of fear. It was making a choice in the face of fear, right? To do what God was calling them to. And today I want us to pick back up on that theme. Pastor Brian talked last week how there's a new wave of leadership that's come into Babylon, right? The Babylonians have been overthrown. Darius is now the king, the Persians and the Medes. And so I want us to pick back up on this theme. In Daniel chapter 6 is where we're going to be. So if you've got your Bibles, you can start making your way there. If you don't have it, it'll be up on the screen. But this is the last of the narratives in the book of Daniel. And so we're going to walk through this last story. And it's probably top 3 most popular. Even if you don't have very much church experience, you probably heard of Daniel in the lion's den, right? It's kind of it's the storybook version. It's something that almost everybody has heard of, even if you haven't grown up much in church. But what we're going to see today is we're going to use this story and we're going to talk about how do we develop the habit of courage. What does Christian courage look like in the face of overcoming immense obstacles? And here's what I would tell you. Christian courage is not conjured up in the moment. Christian courage is developed through a lifetime of small, consistent, obedient decisions. Right? Christian courage we often think about courage in the face of battle or a moment of where like all of your adrenaline's going. But for us, Christian courage is conjured. It's not conjured up in the moment, but it's developed over a lifetime of small, consistent, obedient decisions. Courage is a pattern that you program into your heart. And specifically for us, Christian courage. We said that's a little bit different than what the world views as courage. Christian courage is a pattern that we program into our hearts. And you know, like when you pull up like a Google search, and you start to type something out, it has like predictive text or it has autofill in, right? You can start to, whatever you've searched recently, if you say something similar, it starts to fill in or autofill what you have. It auto-completes what you've been looking for. And is there anything more frustrating for you, especially when you're texting and driving or searching the internet, right, while you're driving, which none of us do, right? Everyone on this front row especially should be like, yeah, we don't ever do that, right? But like there's nothing more frustrating than for Google or even like your predictive tech to like auto-complete something that you don't want. Right? Like you start to type, like, no, I don't want that. And Google and I are at odds right now. Because sometime or another, I Google how to a lot on Google, right? Like it's how to do this, how to do that, how to do that. And at some point or another, I have Googled like how to lose a few pounds. Right? And every time I say how to, Google just smacks me in the face with how to lose a few pounds. Right? And it doesn't matter what, like, I'm like, how to, build this or how to do this. And it's like, first thing, it auto-completes, how to lose a few pounds. And I'm like, Google? We're about to run into some problems. So it's like once a week, I'm angry at Google, right? And because it says this. So it's this thing. But Google knows that we follow patterns. And so it autofills the search bar as we've trained it. right? Like what you've searched for, what you've looked for, it fills in based off of the stuff that you've already put in there. The Greek philosopher Aristotle, who lived actually just not too long after Daniel, said that excellence is not an act, it's a habit. And I would say the same thing is true about Christian courage. It's not an act, it's a habit. It's developed over years and years of repeated patterns of consistent obedience to God. And what I want to show you today, I think there are a few things that are like most likely that are our responses when we run into difficult times or scary moments in our lives. And then I want to show you two things from the text that will help us live a life of courage in the same way that we've seen Daniel. And first one is, courage isn't created in crisis, it's cultivated through consistent prayer. Right? Courage isn't created in crisis, it's cultivated in consistent prayer. And the second thing is Jesus is the greater Daniel, and in him we find an unshakable courage. Okay? All right, Daniel chapter 6. When you're there, let me hear you say word. Oh, come on now. That church that I was at, hadn't been at in 15 years, said word louder than that. When you're there, let me hear you say word. All right, I had to teach them what that meant, but yeah, well, they did it, right? All right, here we go. Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6, Pastor Brian did a great job last week talking about Daniel chapter 5 and how the Babylonians have been overthrown. And there's a piece of this that we're going to follow as we walk through this. Darius decided to appoint 120 satraps over the king and station them over the kingdom and station them throughout the realm, and over them 3 administrators, including Daniel. The satraps would be accountable to them so that the king would not be defrauded. What's happened is, as Darius has come in and the new Persian and Medes have come in and they've taken over this kingdom, they thought as a way to kind of transition the power and make things as smoothly as possible, what he's done is he's kept some of these wise men around. And he said, like, hey, you guys kind of know how things have worked, so what I'm going to do is we're going to keep you around just to make sure things go smoothly. Similar to what we've done with Pastor Brian. Like, we've just kept him around. Let's just make sure this train doesn't run off the track, right? That's kind of, Pastor Ryan said, we call it avoiding landmines, right? So this is kind of what happens, right? So when you think Daniel, think Pastor Brian, right? All right, here we go. All right, so what happens is, verse 3, it says, Daniel distinguished himself above the administrators and the satraps because he had an extraordinary spirit, so the king planned to set him over the whole realm. One thing that is consistent with Daniel is that no matter where he is, no matter what circumstance he is in, no matter how he's got there, no matter how unfair the situation is, Daniel stays positive, almost upbeat even, believing that in this season, God has a plan for him. Right? It's a pretty amazing thing. At multiple points in his life, when everyone else would have said, Daniel, your life is over, you're in a season that God is done using you, Daniel says, I still believe God has something for me. I still believe God has a role for me, and God has called me into this place, into this time, for this reason. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you asked him, God, what do you have for me in this season? God, I'm in a really difficult season, but what is it? How are you going to use me in this season? Let me just point this out too. In the chapter 6, at this point, Daniel is 80 years old. Daniel is 8. We took a huge jump from a few weeks ago when I was talking about Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and they were teenagers. Daniel is 80 now. He's 80. At multiple points in his life, he's been placed in difficult situations. And at this point, Daniel at 80 years old, when he goes into the lion's den here in just a minute, he's 80. Think about that. Some of us are just holding on to the rope to get to 60. Come on, baby. I don't have to wake up and go to work every day. I'm holding on. I'm holding on, right? But Daniel at 80 is still saying, God, what do you have for me? God, what do you want me to do? So let me just say this. This has kind of become the unofficial motto of the 60-plusers group. This was Brian's idea, not mine. But the motto is, if you ain't dead, you ain't done, okay? And I've liked it, actually. I think they should make T-shirts and everything. But there is, and I love how our senior adults have begun serving or continued serving. They haven't stopped serving, but they've been finding ways to serve us as a church community. And this is the same thing that Daniel is in. No matter what season of life Daniel is in, you find him saying, God, what do you have for me in this season? Listen, the sun coming up this morning, the breath in your lungs is proof that God is not done with you. There is more for you. No matter what your age is, there's more for you to sit in the rocking chair on your front porch or walk on the seashore picking up seashells. God has more planned for your life. You don't tap out at some point in your life and say, now I'm going to hit the good life. I don't have to live the way, I don't have to sacrifice, I don't have to do those things. There is more for your life, and Daniel's story is proof of that. Listen, by the way, Daniel's not the only old guy to do something awesome, right? Do you know Michelangelo was 89 when he painted The Last Judgment, which is probably one of his most famous paintings? Thomas Edison was still filing at the patent office for new inventions at age 90. Like, that's pretty awesome, actually. Harlan Sanders was 65 when he opened up his first Kentucky Fried Chicken, one of my favorite inventions, right? And he had basically been fired at every job he had ever had. Winston Churchill won his first election at 62, which means he had lost every election up until that point. Literally, his career didn't begin until he was 62. He was 71 when he led England into World War II. Whether you're 8, 88, or 18, God has big plans for your life. And the question that I would ask you is, when was the last time you asked him, God, what do you have for me in this season of life? All right, let's look at verse 4. Verse 4, the administrators, the satraps, therefore kept trying to find charge against Daniel regarding the kingdom. But they could find no charge or corruption, for he was trustworthy, and there was no negligence or corruption was found in him. Think about this. I always think about this around election time. Like, it doesn't take you 5 minutes watching TV around November like to hear a commercial from the other side, one side or the other, saying, hey, 32 years ago, my opponent voted for Big Nursery to take away candy from babies. And it's just something ridiculous, but if they always find something from the other side, it's usually Big Pharma. That was Big Nursery. Some of y'all didn't get it, just went right by your head. But anyway, okay. But what happens is and these guys, they're like, we can't find anything on Daniel. This is 60 plus years of public ministry and public service for Daniel, and they can't find anything that they can point out and point to the king and say, hey, this is a problem for us. Look at verse 5. Verse 5, it says, then these men said, we will never find any charge against Daniel unless we find something against him concerning the law of his God. It's pretty smart by them, actually. They're like, hey, Daniel doesn't do anything wrong. So if we're going to trip him up, we got to find something regarding the law of his God, because he has continually been faithful to that God. Verse 6, it says, so the administrators and the satraps, they went together to the king, and they said to him, may King Darius live forever. And all the administrators of the kingdom and the prefects, the satraps and the advisors and the governors have agreed to the king that you should establish an ordinance and enforce an edict that for 30 days, anyone who petitions any god or man except you, the king, will be thrown into the lion's den. Therefore, the majesty established the edict and signed the document so that the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be changed. So King Darius signed the written edict. Now, it's a big deal for the Medes and Persians. Once the king signed something into law, it could not be changed. Right? It was a bit of a protection for the people, so that one day, if the king gets beat by somebody in pickleball, he can't outlaw pickleball, right? Some ridiculous thing. But it's the king has to really think about what he's doing, and he can't just make laws just willy-nilly and enslave his people. So it's actually kind of a protection for the people. And they said, let's go ahead and put this in place. Let's look at this and see what happens. Look at verse 10. Verse 10, we see Daniel's response. Verse 10 says, when Daniel learned that the document had been signed, he went into the house. The window in the upstairs room was open toward Jerusalem. And 3 days he got down on his knees and he prayed and he gave thanks to his God. And underline this, just as he had done before. Just as he had done before. When things were difficult for Daniel, he went to God in prayer. When things were good for Daniel, he went to God in prayer. When things seemed to be in a season where things were just okay, he went to God in prayer. When things were the most difficult, in the face of the fiery furnace, when Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego are about to be thrown in, Daniel goes to prayer. When they're about to kill him in chapter 2, he goes to prayer. This is a continual habit. My question for you is, what is your response when fear comes knocking at your door? For Daniel, it was a habit. It was like breathing for him because it was part of his life. Daniel had prayed 3 times a day for 70 years. He had done it in Daniel 1 when they tried to force him to eat the forbidden food, remember? And he said, hey, just give us some time on this. Let me go to God and let me work this out. He'd done it in chapter 2 when the king threatened to kill him because he couldn't interpret the dream, right? In chapter 3 when Rakshak and Benny are threatened to be thrown into the fiery furnace, they go to him in prayer. Whenever Daniel had trouble, whenever Daniel felt threatened, he turned to God in prayer. So this response was natural. It was like breathing to him. It was the most basic decision. He didn't have to think twice about it. When things got difficult, he went straight to God. He said, God, I need you in this. So my question for you is, what is your natural response? When it comes to trouble, when trouble comes your way, what do you do? What do you do when things get difficult for you? When you've been hurt in your marriage, when your spouse isn't treating you fairly, and things just don't seem to be getting any better. When you feel like you've been pressured at your job or school to do the wrong thing, what do? Or when you've been pressured to kind of toe the party line, and it goes against your conscience, or maybe it's a relationship where you're being pressured to do the wrong thing, and you're being pressured to conform, what do? What's your response? I think most of us probably have the same response, and psychologists would call it fight or flight, right? There's that kind of two responses, but I think there's a couple more, and there's another one that I think I want to add in, and then we're going to see Daniel's response. The first one for us is panic, right? All I think about when I think about this is, like if you Google search, some of us, panic pops in. It auto-fills into your response to fear. And what I think about is like, there's the Will Ferrell movie where I don't remember which one it was, but like when something bad goes on, he just goes, everybody panic. And he's just running in a circle, screaming panic, right? And there's this moment, and some of us respond this way. We get scared and we just cave. We say, look, there's no way out. The pressure is too strong. Everyone else is doing it. I'll be an outcast if I don't. I'll never survive if I don't. So I'm just going to cave in to whatever they're asking to do. It's our version of the law of the Medes and the Persians, and it can't be changed. And and the important people are all behind this, and I don't really have a choice if I want to survive. And listen, the answer to that is, I love the verse in 1 Corinthians 10:13. It says, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to man. But God, who is faithful, will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with temptation, he will also provide a way to escape that you may be able to what? Bear it. In other words, God always provides a way of escape. He will always supply you the strength and the wisdom and the ability to do the right thing. You don't need to panic. You're never trapped in a situation with only bad options. Number two, the second response that we typically have, and this is a big one for me, and God really hit me over the head with it this week, but the second thing is pride. We typically respond in pride. And this is a little bit more of a tricky one for us, because from the outside, this can really look like bold faith for us. Responding in pride can really look like bold faith. We can actually kind of camouflage it up, and it looks like bold faith. The difference between this response and real faith is that when we peel back the layers of this response, what we find is not a humility or a humble dependence on God. What we find is a heart of self-sufficiency. Say, I got this. When we peel everything back, like I can kind of just white knuckle my way through this. I don't need any help from anybody else. I'll work my way through this. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. This is hard. This season's hard right now, but I'll make it through. It's no big deal. And maybe you're here and you've just dismissed this idea that you have a prideful heart. And you say, that's just not me, but here's the deal. I would say join the club, because I felt like that very much this week. But in his grace and his love this week, God brought me back to a place. Because you know what marks or defines a prideful response? What marks or defines a prideful response is a life that's marked by prayerlessness, or minimal prayer, or prayer in the emergency case situation. Prayerlessness is the indicator light on the dashboard of a Christian's heart that warns you that pride has set in. You know how your car dashboard has those little indicators that tell you, like, if the engine is running hot, or there's something under the hood that you can't see that's a problem? That's what pride is for us. How about this? Let's just get to know each other a little bit better. The low fuel light. All right, How many of you, just raise your hand real quick, how many of you, when your car gets under about half a tank or quarter of a tank, you start, all right, I need to find a gas station. Just raise your hand. Like, those are the normal ones of us. How many of you, when the low fuel light goes on, you begin to calculate, I have 13 miles. Good grief. How many of you do that, and then right before your husband gets in, you say, it might be a little low on gas, right? That's tricky, right? How about this? How many, like when the check engine light pops on and there's something, like it's usually just a little picture of the engine. How many of you immediately go like, I got to take this to the dealership, I got to take it to the mechanic, I got to take it to the shop, this needs to be fixed immediately. Who does that? Yeah, good. It's a responsible adult thing to do. How many of you just think, well, this will probably work itself out? Be honest. How many of you just think, this will probably buff out, actually, now that I think about it? That's more probably a suggestion than an actual warning. And here's the thing, though. It's probably burned you at some point, right? Hasn't it? It's probably been a problem for you at some point. You know, you bring it into the shop, and they're like, well, if you would have brought this in 6 months ago when it came on, like, how'd you know it came on? Well, I can see when the code came on, right? No, I think that just came on yesterday. Don't worry about that, right? But at some point or other, it's probably burned us. There's these little indicator lights alert you to problems that are deep in your engine, or the fuel light is on that you can't see how low you are. It's something that you can't see. Listen, prayerlessness is an indicator that the light, that your heart is running on proud. Prayerlessness is the indicator that your heart light is running on pride. It's the indicator that we typically don't want to see or cannot see. It's an indicator for us. Many of us think that prayerlessness is a result of just a lack of self-discipline. Like a life that's not marked by prayer or minimal prayer. We just think, I just don't have the self-discipline to do that. And then that we don't pray enough for the same reason that we don't work out enough or eat enough good, healthy foods or get up early enough. It's just a lack of self-discipline. But prayerlessness is ultimately rooted in pride. We don't pray because we're convinced that if we reach deep down and try hard enough, that we'll find the resources to overcome our obstacles. But at some point, that logic is going to fail you. And it's going to be bad. It's going to be a problem. There's another response is a big one. I think it's passivity. And listen, I think this is the mother of all responses, especially for guys. Especially for guys. I'm not sure what to do, so I'll just sit back and let whatever happens going to happen. I'm just going to let that happen. Or I'll sit idly by and I'll let my wife figure out what is best for our family. And listen, here's the deal. We're called to be more than just casual spectators in your life. You're called to be more than just a casual spectator or a co-pilot in your family. You're called to more of those things. You're responsible to find out what God wants you to do and then be obedient to it. Passivity is not a good response for you in fear or panic mode. And then we have Daniel's response. Daniel's response is prayer. And he just says, let me lay this at God's feet. Daniel says, ultimately, these are his problems because I don't belong to me anymore. I belong to him, which means these problems don't belong to me. They belong to him, and all I'm responsible for is to do what he tells me to do in this moment. That's how we should respond. And listen, church, this is an incredible way for you to live. This is an incredible way for you to live. It's so peaceful because you let Jesus shoulder the weight of your problems. Some of you walked in here this morning and there is heavy stuff on you and you've been carrying it for a while. And in our pride, we'll say like, I'll figure it out. I'll find a way to get through this. But listen, prayer is the response that we need in this moment. Jesus describes the Christian life as easy. Right? He says it's easy. And not because it's all sunshines and giggles or roses. Jesus says we're yoked up together. So your burden might be heavy, but give it to me and it will be light. Listen, Peter says, Cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. Jesus says, bring your burdens to me and I'll carry those things because you aren't meant to carry them anyway. If your response is anything other than prayer, you're making this more difficult on yourself. And when he says yoke, it's a imagery of like if two oxen were like pulling a cart and there's a yoke over the top of them, right? And like they pull it together. Listen, I don't move anything around this place unless Josh is here. Like ask this out. I don't move anything. If Josh is here, yeah, I'll do that. Josh, let's go. Get your young back and let's do this thing, man. And think about this. Like I want you to have this imagery when Jesus says, my yoke is like I'll take care of it for you. Pull your burdens on me, and he says, I'll take care of everything. It's like being yoked with the strongest man in the world. Right? It's like we're carrying this thing together. And the reason why I'll lift stuff with Josh is because I like pick it up and I'm like, oh, this is so heavy. It's not. Oh, this is a real strain. And Josh is like sweating. Like I can see sweat coming off his bald head and he's picking it up and he's really strained. I'm like, yeah, this is really heavy. It's not at all. Right? That's what it's like when Jesus says, put your burdens on me and I will take care of those for you. That's the response. That's what it's like to bring your troubles to Jesus. He says, respond in prayer to me because these things aren't meant for you to hold on to anyway. Let's keep going. We only got like 10 minutes. All right, verse 11. It said, then these men went as a group and they found Daniel petitioning and imploring his God. So they approached the king and they asked him about the edict. Didn't you sign the edict for 30 days for any person who petitions any god or man except you? The king will be thrown into the lion's den. The king answered and says, the law of the Medes and the Persians, the order stands and is unchangeable. Then he replied to the king, Daniel, one of the Judean exiles has ignored you. The king, the edict you sign, for he prays 3 times a day. As soon as the king heard this, he was very displeased. But not for the reason why you thought. He liked Daniel. He thought Daniel was good. He loved the way Daniel lived his life. So he set his mind to rescuing Daniel. And he made every effort until sundown to deliver him. But then these men come back to him, and they went with him together to the king, and they said to him, you know, your majesty, it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no edict or ordinance the king established can be changed. So the king gave his order, and they brought Daniel, and they threw him into the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, may your God, underline this, whom you continually serve, rescue you. And a stone was brought and it was placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of his nobles, so that nothing in regard to Daniel could be changed. And then the king went to his place, and he spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him. He could not sleep. The king spent the whole night up. He was thinking about what he had just done. And he was worried about his friend Daniel. And he's wondering, he's like, what is going to happen to Daniel? I've thrown him into the lion's den. And look at verse 19. It says, at first light of dawn, the king got up and he hurried to the lion's den. And he reached the den and he cried out in anguish, Daniel, servant of the living God, the king said, has your God, whom you continually serve, who I've seen you faithfully praying to, who I've seen you faithfully being obedient to, has that God saved you? Has he rescued you from the lions? And then Daniel spoke to the king, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the lions' mouths. And they haven't harmed me, for I was innocent before him and also before you. And your majesty, I have not done harm. The king is overjoyed and gave orders to take Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was brought up from the den, he was found unharmed. Why? Because he trusted in his God. The king gave the command that those who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and thrown into the lion's den, their children and their wives with them. And they did not reach the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all of their bones. Why does the text tell us that? To dismay any kind of argument that maybe the lions weren't hungry. Listen, these lions were starving. But God supernaturally saved Daniel in this moment. Verse 25, listen to this. Chapter 6 starts with a prohibition on prayer, and it ends with a pagan king preaching the gospel. So listen to this. Then King Darius wrote those of every people, every nation, and every language who live on the earth. May your prosperity abound, and I issue this decree that in all my royal dominion people must tremble in the fear before the God of Daniel. For he is what? Eternal. He's the living God. For he endures forever. He's forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed. He is all-powerful, all-knowing. He will be here for forever. And his dominion has no end. He was the beginning, the end, and he will always be around. He rescues and delivers, and he performs signs and wonders. He's a miracle worker in your life. He rescues you and delivers you from the most difficult things in the heavens and on earth. For he rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Here's what I'm going to leave you with two takeaways. You have how we typically respond in difficult moments. We have how Daniel responded. Here's what I want to show you though. Courage isn't created in crisis. It's cultivated through consistent prayer and communion with God. It's not created in this moment of crisis where you choose, I'm going to stand now. This is the day it's cultivated in consistent prayer with God. Daniel didn't sum up the courage the moment he was thrown into the lion's den. His courage was the result of years and years of faithful small acts of obedience, patterns he had laid down consistently for 3 times a day for years and years of his life. Daniel had pre-decided to follow Jesus. He demonstrated that regularly by meeting with God and being in communication with him and turning over his prayers to God. He said, I'm going to decide on this day, you get all of my concerns, all of my worries. You get everything that's going on in my life because you know about it anyway, so there's no reason for me to carry this stuff. He says, you get it all. He's predetermined. I'm going to make a choice to stand. Listen, the blank in the Google search of our hearts will not autofill with courage unless you have trained it through small, consistent acts of obedience. That will not pop up in your life unless you have done that. If your life is marked by a life of minimal prayer, when it comes time to stand, you will fail. Courage is not conjured up in the heat of the moment. Courage is like what we see in the book of Daniel. It's cultivated through consistent communion with the Father. It's found in prayer. If you find yourself and you're like, oh, I haven't prayed in a while. Like, this is for you. If you find yourself stressed, anxiety, nervous about the future, this is what we're called to do, is go and bring that stuff to him. Courage is not conjured up in the heat of the moment. Courage, like what we see in Daniel, is found, it's cultivated, it's in consistent communication with the Father. It's found in prayer. You're worried about your marriage, bring it to him in prayer. You're scared to death in the parenting season that you're in right now, he gets your prayers. You're terrified about the future, you tell him about it in your prayers. You don't know how you're going to make it financially this month, then guess what? He gets your first and your best, and that goes with prayer too. He gets it all. You're not meant to carry this stuff on your own. Fill in the blank, whatever your fear is, whatever your thing is, the answer is found in prayer. Courage comes from consistent prayer to God and predetermining in your mind before you get into the moment, I choose to be faithful to God. This is number 2 for us, and this is a big one. This is the whole point. Jesus is the greater Daniel. Jesus is the perfected Daniel, and in him we find an unshakable courage. Because of Jesus, we now choose courage because of what he's done. Not because of our own abilities, but because of what he's done. One of the mistakes people make in this story is they turn it into like a hero tale. Right? We see this and remembering like the Sunday school version, we leave here aspiring to be Daniel. Right? And that's awesome. Like I've heard it like dare to be a Daniel. Like be a Daniel, be faithful like Daniel. But that's not the point of this story. It's not the point of any story in the Old Testament for that matter. Listen, the Old Testament was not primarily written to give us heroes to emulate, but a Savior to worship. Everything points to Jesus. Remember at Easter when I almost passed out when I walked you through the whole Bible? Right? I said everything points to Jesus. It's the same in this story. He was the 4th man in the fire. He's the same one that walks in and shuts the mouths of the lions for Daniel. He is the whole point. We're not trying to be a Daniel. Yes, we can follow his story and be encouraged by it. But the point is we are looking for a Savior that we can worship. And in that, it gives us an unshakable courage. When we see Daniel's story, listen, if we try to copy the example of Daniel or anyone from the Old Testament, Daniel or David or Abraham or Esther or Ruth, we'll likely end up discouraged by our own failures. That's how it is for me, at least. No matter how much I coach myself or how many pep talks I give myself in the mirror, I find myself that I just can't sustain lasting courage. I may succeed for a moment, but it's usually only to fall back on my face again, more discouraged, more hopeless feeling than ever. But when you see Daniel's story and all the stories of the Old Testament, and you see that they point to Jesus, and this story becomes to look different for us. But just look at the similarities between Jesus' story and this story in Daniel. Both Daniel and Jesus were the picture of innocence. Actually, the prophet Ezekiel, who was a contemporary of Daniel, would say Daniel is one of the three most righteous people to ever live. And we of course know Jesus is the most righteous person ever to live. Both Daniel and Jesus had jealous political leaders who drummed up false charges against them to try and kill them and eventually kill Jesus. Both Daniel and Jesus had a primary judge who was in charge. For Daniel, it was Darius. For Jesus, it was Pilate, who tried to declare them innocent and tried to spare them to no end. Both Daniel and Jesus were thrown into a pit whose entrance was covered by a large stone and sealed with a government seal and left for dead. Both Daniel and Jesus had loving friends who ran to the tomb early in the morning to see about them. Both Daniel and Jesus walked out of that tomb alive the next morning. Both Daniel and Jesus, after this ordeal, were raised up to the second in command of the kingdom. Daniel under Darius, and Jesus seated at the right hand of the Father in heaven. Listen, one major difference though. One major difference between these two: Daniel eventually died and Jesus defeated death. One huge difference. And we do this story a disservice if we reduce it to just the little kid version of Daniel in the lion's den. We see it about a story about being brave. We have these fun little images of Daniel down in this pit with these kittens. But make no mistake, this is no kid's adventure tale. The only reason that we see it like that is because we live in a place where we don't have any fear of lions. We don't know what it is. Like, we go to the zoo and we look at them from a safe distance and we're like, oh, look how cute they are. They sleep and they yawn and oh, it's so sweet. I was reading the story about a park ranger in South Africa who was attacked by a lion. And it was not sweet. It was not sweet. He's one of the few people that survived a lion attack. And it made me think of, and God is funny how he does this, but last night there was a show on from my childhood. It's called Ghost in the Darkness. You may remember this one. It's kind of late 90s. It's got Val Kilmer in it. Some tremendous acting. Michael Douglas, yeah, it's good stuff. But the story it's actually based off of a true story. And it's based off of these two lions who literally hunt and devour this group of people in Africa. They're building this bridge and they're trying to get through. And it comes to a halt and a stop because these two lions consistently are attacking these people at night. And there's just even this one moment where like the camera shoots to this thing and you get this picture of this lion and then he just rips a guy right out of his tent while he's sleeping and drags him off like by the neck, and it's gruesome, and he's pulling him out of there and he's ripping that thing away. And like I had to turn it off because it was dark last night, right? But I remember watching this as a kid, and I told Jen, I had a nightmare after I watched this. Because that thing left an imprint on me. Like, I very much am never going to Africa. Like, no thanks. We're going to Turkey next week, and I had to double check and make sure there was no lions where we will be. Listen, why does this scary movie have anything to do with Daniel 6? It created in me a real fear in the moment. And sometimes when we read stories like Daniel and the lion's den, we tend to just pass by and think of them as the kids' version of our story. That's not it, though. Because this whole story points to the cross of Jesus. You see, we talked about Psalms 22 at Easter. Remember we talked about that? How when Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me? There's a line in there where it says Jesus is thrown to the lions of judgment. It says, which circled him, they tortured him, they tore him apart. And Jesus was more innocent than even Daniel was. Yet before Jesus' body reached the bottom of the same pit, he had only made it 6 hours on the cross before the lions had devoured him and ripped him piece from piece. Unlike Daniel, no angel came to save and stand by him and shut the lions' mouths. Jesus was left in the blackness, utterly alone and abandoned by God, suffering the fate that we, the guilty ones, deserved. God did not shut the mouth of Jesus' lions like he did for Daniel. He let them tear him apart. His body was left entombed in an icy grip of death for 3 days before the angel finally came and rolled away his stone. And let me show you where Jesus and Daniel differ. When Daniel came out of the lion's den, he came out alone, and no one else was saved by God's deliverance him. But when Jesus came out of the tomb, he came out as the head of a mighty company of people who had been redeemed from the pit of death and from their sin. That's us. There's a big difference there. Because of the work of Christ on the cross, on behalf of his people, the divine judge says, you're not guilty, you're free, and you're forgiven. Because of what Jesus has done. See, here's the thing. And if I know that, if I understand what Jesus has done, Jesus went into the lion's den for me. If I know that, I know he's taken on himself all the judgment of my sin, and that there's no condemnation anymore of those who are in Christ Jesus. What that means is that in whatever I'm doing now, whatever I'm going through, that God is with me. He's standing beside me, because anything that would have turned God against me, Jesus has removed from me on the cross. He's taken on all of those things for me. And see, if God is for me, who can be against me? If the Lord is my strength and my shield and my light and my salvation, whom should I be afraid of? I don't have to be afraid of the things that might kill my body, because God can preserve my soul. That means that God is with me in cancer. It means that he is with me at the death of a friend or a family member. Gone way too soon. He's with me in the pain of betrayal and the sting of injustice. He's with me in every single struggle and frustration and failure I go through, promising to never leave or forsake me, promising to overcome everything through me, and constantly whispering all the time, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. That's where our strength comes from. So yeah, I might walk through the valley of the shadow of death, but I will fear no evil, for thy rod and thy staff comfort me. Knowing that Jesus, to whom Daniel's life points to, is with me, gives me courage to face danger like a Daniel. That's what this is all about, to be consistent like Daniel, and the ability to keep going when I haven't been consistent. So thank God for examples like Daniel, but we worship Jesus. The point is Jesus. He took on our punishment in the lion's den, and he now promises to preserve you in any den against any lion that you might face today. We can have courage to face anything with him because of an unshakable courage we get from Jesus. Here's what I would tell you. If you're walking through this thing on your own, and you're trying to white knuckle this thing, and maybe you've never made a decision to turn everything over to Jesus, today is the day to do that. You will not make it on your own. If your life is marked by prayerlessness, and you're filled with stress and anxiety and nervousness about things that you possibly can't control, then you need to turn over your life in prayer to Jesus. Not because he will make your life better, but because he is better than life itself. Let's stand and pray. Father God, thank you for your word. Jesus, in this moment, I know there are those of us who have brought stuff into this place, God, that has been a heavy burden on our life. God, we aren't meant to carry those things on our own. And your word says if we'll simply just turn those things over to you, God, you will gladly carry those for us. Sometimes, Lord, I think turning it over is the hardest thing to do. We feel like if we just keep carrying it on ourselves, we can make it through. But God, the most difficult decision is to say, God, I don't have this. I can't do this without you. God, if there's someone here today that they need to say that today, God, my prayer is that they would come right here to these altars. They would say, God, you get whatever is on my shoulders, whatever has been wearing me down, whatever has been burdening me, God, I'm turning it over to you because I'm not meant to carry it. God, whatever that thing is in their life, Lord, my prayer is today that they would not leave here without being changed by your presence in their life. God, they would not walk out of those doors with those same things on their shoulders, God. And Lord, in this moment, my prayer is that you would give them courage to step out and to do that. God, to be faithful to you in consistent obedience to laying those things down at the foot of the cross and say, Jesus, you take care of these things for me because I can't do it anymore. Lord, it's in your name we pray. Amen. Whatever that thing is that God spoke to you, this is your chance to respond.